It's that time of year again, where I look back at all the reviews I've done in 2001 and decide which ones were the worst ones I've reviewed. I mainly only review Nintendo Switch games, and there are quite a few bad ones in the eShop. Some of them on this list were not terrible though, just okay. So that gives you some indication that this year wasn't so terrible for me. I went back and looked at all the games I reviewed this year and reevaluated them. Some of them originally might have had a better review score of sale, but in comparison to the other games, it's worse than them. Just remember, this is a list of games that I didn't like. If you think a game should have been on here, maybe I didn't review it. Or I might have actually liked it. You might have a different feeling, but it's based on the other games I've played and reviewed this year. So with that said, number 10. Cozy Grove. A little bit of a spoiler now. This is going to be number 10 on my worst and best list. It's a good game that is dragged out incessantly. The quest to get some of the ghosts to move on to their final resting lasts so long, you might actually forget why they were even there in the first place. In the description, they say this is about a 40-hour game, and you should triple that time because of the slow-moving plot. That's why it's number 10 on the worst list. It's still worth a buy, but it needs to cut out about a third of its quests. Plus, it also runs terribly on the Switch. There was talk of helping her get off this island, and they would send messages to you to see how you were doing. In the back half of this, though, your parents never contact you. The scout leader doesn't even mention a rescue, and spends most of the letters that he sends you talking about some nonsense in their lives. What are you, their pen pal? How about you actually get me off this island? These people don't give a shit about you. It's shameful. At the very end of the game, they show you a picture of your parents greeting you at the dock when you finally get off that island. And I would have loved it if they spun that picture around and it was just my character flipping them off. Every single character who isn't a ghost is basically a terrible person. And even some of the ghosts were bad, but at least they started getting better throughout the days that I was with them. The basic story about this is that you're a poor stranded scout on an island full of ghosts who never eats and dreams of a hellish red hue. Half the reason I wanted to finish this game was to see if she was in purgatory and died in the crash that stranded her on this island. But it turned out no, just nobody gave a care about her at all. Number 9. Song for a Hero Definitive Edition. Now let me make this very clear. I enjoyed the platforming in this title. It had some great and varied locations you have to go to, and if that was the main focus, it actually probably would have gone on my best list. The problem is the gimmick of this game is that the main character is constantly singing. And while that can be funny at times, his singing is just terrible. I shouldn't have to mute the audio just to enjoy a game. And for that reason alone, I put it at number 9. And that's when I realized why I had such a problem with the singer. The way the songs were sang, it sounded like something maybe I would have done. So I wanted to put that to the test. So I picked 3 random scenes, and I want to compare the differences between that singer and my singing, and see if they were kind of similar, or even if I was better. Spoiler, I wasn't. But I also don't have a backing track or auto-tune. So let's compare.
Something is further along, and it's hard not to stare. What do I see? A piece of the ground just floating in the air.
Something is further along, and it's not hard to stare. What do I see? A piece of the ground just floating in the air.
There's water in this place. Can I even escape? Maybe swimming's my saving grace.
There's water in this place. Can I even escape? Maybe swimming is my saving grace.
I'm not quite sure what it is I am. I do the best I can as my journey leads me across the land. How many vases am I gonna break? One at a time. Wonder if someone will even mind.
I'm not quite sure where it is I am. I'll do the best I can as my journey leads me across the land. How many vases am I gonna break? One at a time. Wonder even if someone will mind. Number 8. Gnosia. Originally, I was much more favorable on this title, until I played it for more than a few hours. It really becomes a repetitive slog, which had a somewhat interesting story, but it was bogged down by text that just kept repeating every time you played a session, so it was just, you're reading the exact same thing over and over again. It got really tiring. If you don't know what this is, it's basically a single-player version of Among Us, and the appeal only really lasts until you realize there really isn't anything much more to it than that. Now, the game really only lasts about 15 minutes for each one, 1. Less than that if you happen to die on day 1. But that only happened rarely to me. Now you might be seeing all the death and scantily clad women and wonder, why didn't he put that M-rated tag at the beginning of this video? That's because this is T-rated. This game, which has multiple shower scenes, is T-rated. Now to be fair, those shower scenes are completely covered up, but they're also so unnecessary. Yes, it does reveal information about one of the characters, but there was a less fan service way to do it. Number 7. Zen Club. This platforming visual novel had potential to be interesting, with its intriguing premise at the beginning of the game about a group of kids trapped in an underwater theme park forced to possibly kill each other. It turns out that whole plot is just a twist to get people to play it, and very quickly it just turns into a dull road trip with terrible platforming sections. After you escape the facility, which really isn't a spoiler since it happens in the first hour of the game, you find yourself on the other side of Japan, with no one in sight and everywhere looking abandoned, and the Go-Getters Club decides to make their way back to Tokyo to see if their family is safe. Now, how do they do this, you might ask? They make the insane decision to try and walk over 1,000 kilometers to it. It makes no sense in the moment, and it makes no sense every second you're actually playing this. Why are they walking? There has to be a car somewhere on the roads or towns that they're exploring. Well, you might be saying, well, it's a bunch of kids, they might not know how to drive a car. Putting aside that one of them might have played a video game before, and should understand the concept of push the gas pedal down, they have no issues figuring out how to run a train, or a helicopter. But apparently a car is too complicated. The bizarre thing is that they go out of their way to explain every other odd thing that makes no sense. I had all kinds of notes about the insane decisions these kids made. Like, why are they always sleeping outside when there's houses and apartments they could break into? They decide to make an offhand comment that the places are too dusty and they'd rather sleep on the dirt-filled ground. Like, that makes more sense. Number 6. Root Film. I played a lot of visual novels this year, apparently. 4 of them are on these worst lists, with 1 coming up. I tend to enjoy them though, as there's definitely one of them on my best list this year. This one felt like though it was paid by the Japanese tourist board, as we were constantly going from one landmark to another. It had some interesting murders to solve, but in the end it was just too dull to keep my interest. I am going to spoil this one part of it, because 1, the way this was set up was just nuts, and 2, 99% of you will never play this game, so it doesn't matter. So here's the setup. There's a crossbow hidden in this room, loaded with a string that, when cut, would fire the bolt. How'd the string get cut? It didn't. It got burned off by the power of the sun. The killer took some ice, polished it to make it look like a magnifying glass, and put it up in a window. This has to be one of the stupidest ways to kill someone. What if the victim saw this elaborate crossbow string setup? And honestly, how could he not? And what if the sun didn't hit that very specific spot? And instead of this whole complicated setup, why not shoot this crossbow bolt through this open window with the person instead? It feels like they way overthought this. Number 5. Space Invaders Forever. This title is fun for about 5 minutes, and then you'll realize how repetitive it is. They try to make it fun by having lots of colors and effects, but in the end it's just the same thing ad nauseum. The best one in this collection is Arkanoid vs. Space Invaders. But the problem is you can't play it on the TV. It's handheld only. Like I mentioned, the other modes were just the same thing repeated over and over again, but with different effects to hide that. While I loved all the colorful action and the different ways they tried to change up the gameplay, in the end it got very old quick. But that's nothing compared to the final game. And that was Space Invaders Gigamax 4 SE. It's just like the original Space Invaders game, only this time with multiplayer. Unlike the previous game, it's just dull from the very beginning. Sure, if you have friends to play this with, it might be more enjoyable. But I didn't have anyone who wanted to play this with me, so to me it was really dull. It makes me wonder why they didn't add an online component to this game. It's simple looking enough that I could see it working. Then it might be fun, but no. If you don't have someone wanting to play this with you, it's not going to keep your interest very long. Number 4. Vera Bloch. Ghost in the Castle. Alright, well this is the last visual novel, I promise. This novel is a detective story, but you're not really solving anything. It's all done for you. The only thing you're going to be doing is playing minigames when situations arise. The story isn't great and the characters are not that engaging. While I did like the comic book feel to it, that's about the only thing I liked about it. It is about a woman named Vera Blanc. She is dying and her wealthy father has tried everything to help her. She is eventually given a mysterious treatment that not only heals her, but also makes her smarter and gives her the ability to read minds. Now this is actually a very serious story at this point. When they decided to show how she was absorbing knowledge and becoming a genius, they threw it to this panel. And I started laughing so hard. The tone shift was just insane! She goes from dying in a bed to a bikini using computers to supercharge her brain. There is no reason for this shot. There's also a few more of these scenes in the game that really are only there to objectify her for no reason. I was kind of expecting a somewhat serious story, but when this panel came up, I'm like, okay, I know where this is going. Number 3. Instant Sports Paradise. They decided to turn the series into a sort of open world exploration game. It's a chore to explore the world, and I hated the top-down perspective. And the whole thing overall just kinda sucks. There were a couple decent games in this collection, but they actually managed to ruin bowling, a game that was actually their best in their previous entries. Bowling, on the other hand, is one of the most broken games in this whole collection. Since there is no motion controls, you just throw the ball, and you move your avatar's hand back in order to get more power. The problem is the throw is very sensitive, and there's no power meter, so you're never going to know how much power you're putting into something. You're just going to be guessing. It's very frustrating to play. Now, one of the games I actually really enjoyed was mini golf. There are 3 courses with 6 holes each. They're somewhat basic, but they control just fine. Oh look, a power bar. I guess the creators do know what one looks like. So why wasn't this in bowling? The wingsuit defied the laws of gravity by letting you gain height, and it never moved like you would expect in the real world. What kind of sadistic monster makes collectibles next to cliffs? Let's see if these tourists can collect these collectibles. Oh wait, they're gonna crash into it? I guess they're gonna die. This place would be a nightmare with lawsuits. Number 2. Escape First. Making an escape room into a video game is not an easy task, and that shows in this title. I was constantly running into issues with the controls, and the rooms you were locked into were never enjoyable. There was one that wasn't bad, but it was cheating by having many rooms you went into. Overall, you can tell this was just a VR game ported to the Switch, and there really wasn't much here to enjoy. Let me talk about this insane lobby. It has a room with a wall for room selection, 2 couches, cubbies like we're in kindergarten, and an unobstructed access to just jump off a cliff. There's no railing to be found anywhere. Now look at this. How exactly did I get in this room? There's no door. Did I just climb up some unseen ladder? Do we have to trek through this forest to find this magical escape room setup? There is an invisible wall to stop you from leaving, but why have this open area? The whole atmosphere makes no sense with an escape room. If they really want to set up shop here, it would be a crazy waste of money. Number 1. Chicken Range. I really hated this game. The controls were terrible. The game had a strange secondary area for no reason you had to deal with, and the accessory that came with the title just didn't work. In fact, if you try to use it, the title just becomes unplayable. It's so repetitive and dull, you're not going to bother to play this for more than 2 minutes. Even young kids won't find any enjoyment in this. And that's why it's my number 1 pick for the worst game I reviewed this year. The game itself is just firing at chickens until they fill up the screen with eggs that they shoot at you. It's as boring as it sounds. It's also way harder than you might expect. They expect you to get to a certain number of points to progress to the next level. And I can see kids not being able to pass it due to the bad controls and unnecessary play areas. What I mean by the unnecessary play areas is that you're actually expected to move the screen over a few feet to shoot chickens before they shoot eggs at you. There is no reason for this other than making it annoying. Just keep everything on one screen. Well, that's it. My top 10 worst games that I reviewed this year. Like always, I like to end the year on a positive note, so I'm going to look back at all my reviews and find my top 10 best games that I reviewed this year. Thank you all for watching and have a happy holidays.